After spending over 13,000 hours talking to men and women about their relationships over the last 8 years, I found out that everyone has these two things in common. They're wounded by love and they're confused by love. They're confused about why their partner doesn't desire them anymore, or they're confused about what they desire themselves. And I've noticed a couple of patterns in particular. I'd be a fool not to notice these patterns. There are a lot of nice stand-up guys who hear the phrase, "I love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore." And there's a lot of strong, empathic women who are tired of not being desired for whatever reason. And what I've done is help these people eliminate the suffering that comes from the toxic relationship patterns, the toxic thinking patterns, and the toxic emotional patterns without blaming, fighting, or condemning themselves or others. And in this program called Marriage Alchemy, over the last 8 years, 96% went from suffering to no suffering. 80% of those went from suffering to good. And about 18 months ago, I decided to stop doing that Marriage Alchemy program to work on taking some of my current and former clients to the next level. And what is that? Helping them to transform their former or current suffering into the fuel for creating bliss and ecstasy that comes from being their most authentic self. And during that time, I've developed what I'm calling the ACDC Fermentation Project. And I'll walk through what that name means. The name AC stands for Alchemy and Chemistry. The name DC stands for Desire Consciousness. And I'm going to also talk about why it's called the Fermentation Project. But let me just start by showing that in these relationships, the alchemy part of the work is looking at these unconscious currents that are taking place in the unconscious. And if a person is standing up here in the conscious, this unconscious takes up 95% of who they are. And they may be finding themselves attracted to someone else, and they're not sure why. They might give reasons for it, but there's a certain chemistry that's just there. And they try to explain it, but basically they find themselves attracted to each other, and there's definitely a spark that happens in between. And that spark is chemistry. But the chemistry is informed by the alchemy. And traditionally, chemistry and alchemy, these are two different traditions of inquiry that until the 17th century were together. Chemistry and alchemy were practiced together. But in the 17th century in the Enlightenment, the chemists broke off and they said, alchemy, that's bullshit. We don't believe in that. We're just going to focus on the chemistry. And so it's basically ignoring all of this down here. So there's been a resurgence, especially in the last several decades, looking at alchemy and returning the unconscious and the study of the unconscious, especially advanced by people like Jung and others, recovering the look at these things that are happening underneath the surface. And there's a personal subconscious, and there's a collective unconscious. And both of these things need to be in alignment. And when these are in alignment down here, as above, so below, as below, so above, if there's attraction going on down here, then there's going to be chemistry, right? And so these match. And so what I've done especially in the last 2 years, is started focusing on the chemistry as well, because there's things that are happening at the physical, biological, neurochemical level that are not fighting against the alchemy, but they're paralleling. And you can look at the chemistry, you can look at what's going on through the physical interaction and learn about the alchemy, and you can look at the alchemy to learn the chemistry. So this approach is looking at both of these factors, and it's allowing us to go much deeper, not just getting out of suffering, but going after that bliss state, that state of spiritual or sexual ecstasy. And the desire consciousness is another fight that's been going on for actually thousands of years. And the desire is looking at also the physical, where consciousness is looking at the metaphysical. Consciousness is looking at the mind. Desire is looking at the body, thinking that the chemistry is only something that is physical and in the body, described by these basic animal instincts. But those who favor the consciousness approach say consciousness is superior and prior, and that desire doesn't matter, and the only way to reach spiritual ecstasy is by getting rid of desire, right? But this approach is looking at recovering desire and actually using desire as the motivating force behind all action, but also recognizing that consciousness guides that action, and that when we link these two together, we are going to be able to discover these new depths. And for example, we have 3 levels of the human. We'll just show it by a snowman here. If this person, let's say, in their mind is attracted, but in their heart's not in it, but their gut is in it, and this person, let's say, well, originally they're all in head, heart, and gut, and then when all of those are in alignment, then that moves the person, and then it becomes something that feels like this perfect chemistry, right? But then as things change, we start to not desire. Maybe our head's in it, but our heart's not in it. Maybe our gut's in it, but the heart's not in it. Maybe one person's head is in it and their heart is in it, but not their gut. And if enough of these start going in the opposite direction, then we lose that spark, and that spark starts to cause, instead of attraction, it causes this person to pull away, which might even trigger this person to instinctively pursue it even more. And even though they in their head might know, nope, this is not the best thing for me, their gut is thinking, I'm going to die if I don't have this connection, because this person is providing something for me that my survival depends on. And this is where you start having these codependent interactions. But if you understand the desires and understand that it's not just a single desire, but we are beside ourselves, right? Because we're torn between things, and there's one part of us that's being attracted and one part that's not, and we don't even really know. So desire consciousness is taking a very complex interaction that is all 95% unconscious, and it's bringing it to the conscious through learning the languages of the heart and the gut, which are languages that we don't usually know. And we use the language of archetypes and the language of dreams and the language of metaphors and symbols, which is what the gut speaks. And so by learning that language, we're not only able to understand the chemistry, the that seems like a chemical reaction, because it is, but it's primarily an alchemical reaction. But by understanding both of these, instead of fighting one against the other, we combine these things, and we're able to find out, first of all, what I truly desire, because most people don't know what they desire. Almost everyone I've spoken to, when I talk to them, they'll tell me what it is they desire and what they're confused about, but they're really lacking knowledge even about what they desire. Should I stay or should I go? They don't know, because they're torn, right? They're divided. So until a person gets fully aligned, they're not going to know whom is going to be attracted to them and whom they are attracted to. So that's the core of the desire consciousness. And then looking next at the fermentation part of this project. Why do we call it the fermentation project? Because there's two options. Most people are in what I call the foment stage, which is it's churning. Their desires are churning against each other. That the head is fighting with the heart, and the heart is fighting with the gut. They're all going in different directions. And so it creates this hell loop where I know I should get out of this relationship. It seems toxic, but for some reason I just can't get away. Or their gut is telling them, oh, I want to be with this person, but their head is telling them, I don't want to, right? And so it can be a lot of churning, right? And agitation, but it keeps churning without any solution. So it's foment. It's also foe because my head is the foe of my heart, or my gut instinct is the foe of my heart or my head. And then instead of acknowledging that inner fight, I see that the person that I'm with is my foe. And so the masculine and the feminine are fighting each other as foes. And the alternative is to ferment. And ferment, it's a churning as well, but it involves letting the wild yeasts and bacteria into the mix and letting them do their work. So when we're worried about safety because we've been hurt and wounded by love, it stifles our curiosity and our ability to grow in our knowledge of ourselves and the other person. And we are afraid to let our wild side out, and we're afraid to connect to the other person's wild side. But guess what? There's no spark, there's no passion, there's no desire without the wild meeting the wild. His wild gut needs to meet her wild gut. And when that happens, there's passion. So fermenting is taking a look at what's our attitude towards these things. Foment, in fermentation, fungi is the enemy. So we take an anti-fungal approach, right? And we use fungicides, and we try to just kill everything that is wild, right? But in the fermenting process, we realize that, we take a pro fungi approach, and we know that it's the fungi or the yeast that turns the sugars into wine or into alcohol, or there's many different types of fermentation processes, but there's always a fermenting agent that's eating up the substrate, either the sugars or the carbohydrates, and turning it into a desirable, wild, and delicious, but also very different product, right? So we start with this sweetness of initial love, the sugars, and the fungi turn that into alcohol, which is the elixir, right? It's the wine. It's the miracle of turning contaminated water into wine. And so the foment is antifungal. It's also antibacterial, which is another fermenting agent. But fermenting is probiotic, right? And it's realizing that, yeah, some bacteria can be harmful, some fungi can be toxic, but if you learn to work with them instead of just trying to eliminate them, you end up with an entirely different result. So it's not just a safety first approach, because if we do safety first, then we're not going to have fungi, and we're going to try to eliminate bacteria. We're going to try to see the toxic femininity or the toxic masculinity as a substantial foe, rather than seeing that fungi and the bacterial can be for us rather than against us, right? And so we ferment, and we do this both chemically and alchemically, and we bring all these things together so that the nice guy is able to go back to finding that wildness within himself and reconciling it and working with it. And the empathic strong woman is able to reconnect with her wild feminine side as well, and they are able to churn in a fermenting rather than a fomenting way. And these are processes that have been spoken about for thousands of years, but these processes of the mystery schools have been suppressed and censored, and those practicing them have been wiped out, and their practices have been erased. But we are in a new time. We are in a time right now where collectively, not only individually, but collectively, we're starting to ferment, because these toxins are starting to be coming out and wild and being exposed. And it seems like a crazy, crazy, crazy time right now with all that's going on. It seems like the masculine, the collective feminine are completely at odds and at war with each other. So the solution is not just to succumb to these currents and let us be completely swallowed up in this foment, in this collective foment, but to get together and realize that in groups and in couples, but also within oneself, one can do this individually fermenting. I ferment my masculine with my feminine, and I can ferment myself with another person, and we can also work on this together or play with this together, and we can create this amazing elixir of either spiritual ecstasy or sexual ecstasy, and sometimes they're woven together. So if you're interested in joining this project, learning about this, I invite you to click on the link below, and I can tell you lots more about it.